guys, it's Marc Zicree, Mr. Sci-Fi, also known as Marc Zicree of Space Command. And it's a very interesting time in science fiction. I just got back from the Star Wars convention, and I just saw Insurgent. And I wanted to talk about science fiction that's aimed at teenagers and young people versus science fiction that's aimed at adults, because I think the lines are blurring, and it's a very interesting evolution of this. And I've been thinking about it. Insurgent, as you know, is based on the science fiction novels, the YA young adult novels, Divergent, Insurgent, etc. And they're very similar to the Hunger Games, a certain subgenre of dystopic science fiction that's aimed at young adults, coming off, of course, Harry Potter, fantasy, YA, that again leaped the audience boundary into the adult market. And Star Wars, I was thinking about Star Wars particularly, and when I was a kid, there were young adult novels by Robert Heinlein, who was also writing adult science fiction as well. And it was very interesting because Heinlein he started in 1947 writing a book called Rocket Ship Galileo. And it was about a group of teenage boys, and their uncle who build a rocket to the moon and are the first flight to the moon. And when they get there, they discover Nazis on the moon. And these are fugitive Nazis fleeing from the end of World War II. And of course, it was a very timely thing in 1947 to write a story like that, coming right off the war. And it's ironic now because we have, Iron Sky, which has Nazis on the moon, and Iron Sky 2, which is coming down the pike with Nazis at the center of the earth riding dinosaurs. But so Rocket Ship Galileo began a series of successful juvenile novels, and Heinlein would basically write one per year. And there were other science fiction writers writing books aimed at the teen market. Andre Norton and Isaac Asimov was writing under pseudonym. He was writing the Lucky Star books, and these were published throughout the 50s into the early 60s. And they would package hardcovers with a special binding to sell to libraries. So these books were in libraries all across the country and school libraries as well. And I was a kid growing up in the 60s and came across these books, particularly the Heinlein juveniles. They were wonderfully written. They were very imaginative. How Spacesuit Will Travel and Citizen of the Galaxy. He was writing one a year. And then, interestingly enough, he wrote two that were essentially rejected by his young adult publisher. One was Podkayne of Mars, and the other was Starship Troopers. And Starship Troopers particularly was viewed as too hard-edged and too adult in its politics and in its violence, particularly. And so Heinlein then published Podkayne of Mars and Starship Troopers as adult novels, and Starship Troopers won the Hugo for Best Novel, the top award in science fiction. And that was the end of his writing the YA novels, the young adult novels. And I was thinking about Star Wars, and I realized that Star Wars would have been a perfect Heinlein juvenile book. It's about a young protagonist who's late teens, essentially, and he has this adventure that takes him into the stars, and he becomes this big hero. It's very similar in structure to something like Have Spacesuit Will Travel or Citizen of the Galaxy, which is a wonderful book that Heinlein wrote that I highly recommend. And it could have easily have been packaged in the 50s as a YA novel, and yet, of course, it was made instead as a movie. And then Alan Dean Foster wrote it as a novel under, Ghost wrote it for George Lucas. But it was that same gosh gee whiz, a young person rising to his destiny kind of story. And now we have, the movies and books like Hunger Games and Divergent, etc., where it's a female protagonist. But it's a very similar story of someone rising to their calling, becoming the great person of accomplishments. So, so these stories continue to have validity and credence, and continue to tell us how we should stand in the world. So I just wanted to kind of talk about that this time and get into that, because I was thinking about Star Wars and all of these wonderful stories in science fiction that we have that of course are reaching a much broader audience than the young adult novels of Heinlein ever did. But you can still check those out. They're still in print and still wonderful reading. And because they were written for a younger audience, the politics that Heinlein is sort of banging the drum for in his adult novels is not as noisy in his young adult work. His adult novels, Heinlein was sort of a very, you could say right-wing. He was, some people might say libertarian, but he was definitely a very political writer. But in a book like Citizen of the Galaxy, or particularly Have Spacesuit Will Travel, where a young man enters a soap jingle contest for a trip to the moon and instead wins a spaceship. He doesn't place first, It's a great story. It's a wonderful story, wonderfully written. It's also available on audio. You can check it out there. These are things well worth investigating. So that's sort of it for now. Lots to talk about in days to come. Working very hard and diligently and well on Space Command. I'll bring you up to date on that soon. But with Mr. Sci-Fi, if you want to comment, subscribe, spread the word, send this to friends. We're looking to increase our audience as ever. But thanks very much. It's fun talking to you all and sharing these memories and these times with you. So we'll be in touch really soon. Bye.